Welcome, everyone. I hate to sort of cut the nattering. It is wonderful for me to see a bunch of faces I haven't seen for a very long time, and I know that there are many people connecting right now who haven't seen each other for a very long time. So welcome into that community, that shared community, and it's wonderful to have you here. Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah? Okay. You guys are way behind the doors in the back there. You can hear me? Okay, awesome. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the Linlathen Lectures public event, annual public event. My name is Kirstin Jeffrey Johnson, and I'm the director of a theology, ecology, and the arts gathering based here in Lanark, known as Linlathen. We've been gathering here in this church for the annual public event since 2015, which is hard to believe, thanks to the gracious hospitality of Hillside Church and their minister, Matt Dick. We are proudly an Ottawa Valley event, as those of you who've been here before know. And part of our leaning into, even more deeply, into being grateful for and seeking a fuller understanding of even a more humble and healthy relationship of this place in which we dwell, is to recognize the deeply rich yet deeply complex history of humans on this land. Tonight we are a wonderful mix of immigrants, old and new, of descendants of immigrants from many centuries back, and of some with Indigenous roots that trace back beyond memory. We have different histories with this place we know of as the Ottawa Valley. And as a part of the Linlathen team, I am humbled to recognize this unceded Algonquin territory on which we are gathered this evening. May the Creator take delight in what we hear tonight, and may it somehow call us into a better relationship with this land, with its community, and its layers and layers of story, of which we are a part. May the sounds that we are about to hear this evening, of instruments, of voice alike, call us into truly parachoretic dance, play, and delight in this place with each other. Some of these evocations tonight will be played out by a wonderful jazz duo who is joining us, Mark Ferguson and Mike Tremblay, who I have yet to meet. My apologies. It's wonderful to have you two gentlemen here. Thank you. Mark is an Ottawa-based pianist, trombonist, producer, composer, and arranger who has performed with many of the world's greatest artists, including Ella Fitzgerald, Tony Bennett, and Aretha Franklin. He's a faculty lecturer in jazz and trombone at Micheal, a performance instructor and sessional lecturer at Carleton, and is active as a jazz clinician at high schools and universities across Canada. He's joined by Mike, who has more than 30 years in the music industry as a woodwind specialist and an educator. Mike is an associate performance faculty member at Carleton and is the co-founder and director of the annual Carleton University Jazz Camp. Among other ensembles, Mike frequently performs with the NAC Orchestra, and over his career, he has played with the likes of Natalie Cole, Alanis Morissette, Diana Ross, and Aretha Franklin. These two have been mainstays of the Ottawa music scene, and tonight we're privileged to have them set the stage for a wonderful poet and a wonderful man and a friend, Micheal. But I will be allowing my father, David Lyle Jeffrey, an Ottawa Valley lad himself, to introduce Micheal. David Lyle Jeffrey is a professor of literature and scripture and a fine poet himself. Dad was a professor for many years, as some of you know, at Ottawa U before he moved to Texas to teach at Baylor University. And he's come back home for this evening to be here with us. After Micheal reads this evening, Mike and Mark will return to the stage with one more piece, allowing us time and space to hold the words that we have been gifted. And with them, and with the clouds of many that this land has held for millennia, to help us better learn to live and love together. Mike and Mark, over to you.
Good evening. We're really pleased to be invited to play a few tunes for you tonight. I hear that Micheal is a jazz fan, which is great, and so we're your opening act. We're going to warm up the crowd for you. Okay. And are there any other jazz fans in the audience? Oh, good. Whew. That's great. So we're going to start with a composition of mine. This is kind of a happy little tune written during the pandemic, and this is called Fair Skies. The next tune we're going to play is another composition of mine. Sorry, we'll do some of Mike's later. Yeah, okay, maybe. And this was written after I was on the road in California for about a month. Actually, Mike was on that tour too. And was really missing home. And when I came home, I sat down at the piano. My wife had gone to work and the kids were at school. So I had the house to myself and sat down at the piano, and this composition just kind of appeared, just kind of came out. And so it's really a celebration of home, and I called it Home. Foolishly, it turns out, because I realized since then there are about 1 million tunes called Home. But so this is another one. This is Home. Thank you very much. We're going to play one more tune before we turn it over to you. This is a jazz standard that some of you might recognize. It's by a great saxophone player named Sonny Rollins, and this is called Olio.
Well, it's a great thing to be home in the Ottawa Valley. I'd like to say that. And in Lanark County, where I spent much of my life and enjoyed it every minute, and it feels good. It's even a greater pleasure to be here at home and introducing to you a man who you may not know before tonight, maybe some of you do, a man who is regarded by many in the poetry world as the greatest English poet of the 21st century. He gets compared regularly with T.S. Eliot and the Four Quartets, with W.H. Auden, with David Jones's Anathemata, for example. And he's a remarkably modest man for what he accomplishes. He's got about 15 or 16 books of poetry. He'll read from some of those tonight. He's also a man who is an accomplished intellectual, a linguist, trained at Congo School first and in Dublin, and then at Trinity College Dublin, and then off to Oslo to do graduate work further in folklore. He has a range, an intellectual range, which is truly startling. You could say of the other poets I mentioned that they have a range, but not over so many disciplines, not over so many languages. Micheal is comfortable in about 10 languages, and I mean comfortable, he'll sit down and talk to you, if that's your language. He reads widely in those languages. And it's fitting, I think, that his poetry has been translated into such languages as Japanese. 4 volumes of his work are translated into Japanese. That's one of his languages. He's been translated into German. That's another one of his languages. He's a cosmopolitan man such as we very rarely get to meet in our time. A man of deep learning and also broad learning. When he went into the university world first, he was, as many of us tend to be, theoretically an academic, like other academics. He was at Trinity College Dublin for a few years. He then was invited to the Dublin Institute for Advanced Studies, where for 13 years he did research. And then he did what almost nobody I know would do. At 40 years of age, he said, I'm packing it in, I'm just going to write poetry for the rest of it. Now that's, you may imagine that, writing poetry for a living isn't a promising and lucrative way. So it takes a kind of commitment, and he has that commitment. In fact, he describes himself as someone who has a ministry of meaning. And I think that sees far into what his poetry is and does. He has a poem from his collected poems, and it's an early poem called Delight. And it's characteristic of him in some ways. The poem is done in terza rima. That's fine for Dante, but you should try it in English. In 7 little stanzas, he simply describes a dinner party with friends. And the last stanza says this, and I love the way he says it. He says, wine sinks its ease to the nerve ends. I feast on faces. That's a powerful thing to note as a difference, right? And he goes on to say about his feasting on faces, boundless laughter and a radiance of friends. That's not like a lot of modern poets. Much modern poetry, for those of you who studied it for any length of time, and I have, it kind of runs a bit dry in the way that, somebody who raps too much of what they do with their own ego. Micheal is a man for others in a very deep way. But I don't want you just to take my word for it, so I'm going to read what major critics from around the world have to say about him as a way of wrapping up this introduction. Here's Anthony Domestico in Commonweal. He describes the 5 quintets as almost impossibly ambitious as a book. And then he goes on to say, but he seems to have pulled it off. And that's true. Playwright Brian Friel, the Irish playwright Brian Friel, describes himself as absolutely in awe of the magnitude, the daring, and of the easy competence of the five quintets. There's a couple of others here that strike me as worthy of mentioning. Kerr O'Doherty calls the five quintets a new cornerstone of civilization, dazzling in its achievement. Frank Armstrong, those are Irishmen for the most part, so you say, well, okay, a little bit of hyperbole there maybe, but Frank Armstrong, who's got some other roots, calls it the most important book of English language literature published so far in this century. And as you'll discover when he reads, you'll not be surprised to know that he's been praised by Nobel laureates, he's been praised by leading scientists, theologians like N.T. Wright and David Ford and Stanley Hauerwas and Peter Oakes, but also praised mightily by people in a diversity of other fields, including such people as we're familiar with here in Canada, Jean Vanier, and the former President of Ireland, Mary McAleese. All of these people who look at what he has done find deep resonance with what they do know, and they're just astonished that he knows so much about the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the Ottawa Valley the great Irish poet, Micheal O'Shiel.
Thank you, David, for such kind words. I hope I can live up to some of them. Thank you also to Kirstin for inviting me here for this weekend. And thank you so much for that music. It was wonderful, Mike and Mark. Thank you so much. You know, in rural Ireland, the dances were often held in the parish hall. And after the slow numbers, in case people got too engrossed, they would play the national anthem. But before that, they would say they wanted to thank the parish priest for the use of the hall. So I want to thank Pastor Matt Dick for the use of the hall, this beautiful church. Be with me, Madam Jazz, I urge you now. Riff in me so I can conjure how you breathe in us more than we dare allow. In words, in hues, and tones, please, Madam, blow, play in me the grace I need to know, how in your complex glory we let go. Show how an open hand is worry-free. Speak again your love's economy, your generous first words spoken, let it be. Enhance our trust in hard-earned betterment. Humbler world we may in turn augment in long adagios of increment. While marveling at your choreography, stars and quarks beyond our mastery, we still explore to praise your mystery. Although each sacred book a lip-read score, improvising, there is always more. You jazz on what's our own and our rapport. Each solo and ensemble of a piece, grooves and tempos shifting without cease, we flourish in a syncopated peace. In all our imperfections we advance, trusting in creation's free-willed chance. Sweet Madam Jazz, in you we are the dance. That's the epigraph to the 5 quintets which I'll be reading from this evening. Now, the 5 quintets is a meditation on modernity, on the last 400 years or so. Dante summed up the Middle Ages on the cusp of modernity, and I suppose the 5 quintets is an attempt in imagined conversations with the movers and shakers of modernity to view modernity as we move out into this, our first global century. How did we get here? Where might we be headed? Now, Dante had a 3-part structure. The 5 quintets has, in fact, a 5-part structure. There is a quintet on arts, on economics, one on politics, one on science, and one on theology, stroke philosophy, on meaning, if you like. The cantos have, these 5 cantos also have parallel movements, if you like to think horizontally, which I call cantos. In other words, there are 5 phases in this 400 years of modernity, which I try to reflect. First of all, you have transition figures who made the shift from the Middle Ages to modernity. Then there's a move either to greater freedom or to more fixity. And thirdly, there's a phase of either excessive control or absolutely extreme freedom. Fourthly, then, there are those who realize that somehow modernity seemed to be going off the rails in some fashion, and they had a vision to try and repair it, even if that vision was somewhat limited. And finally, the 5th era, the 5th canto in each of these domains, in each of these quartets, takes people who, although rooted in their own time and place, somehow or other had a vision which pointed beyond the reign of modernity. Just a word on form. Each of these quintets has a particular form. The arts are sonnets interspersed by haikus, which I like to call a saiku. A portmanteau word, obviously, of sonnet and haiku, taking the most classic Western tradition as a sonnet and the most classic Eastern tradition, the haiku. But the nice thing is that saiku in Japanese means a nice piece of workmanship. The science, then, I have done in iambic pentameter, which many of you will be familiar with. Philosophy, theology is in terza rima as a nod towards Dante, and as David pointed out, because of the canonical form of a word in Italian, they all end in vowels. Terza rima is a cinch compared to trying to do it in English. And then the economics and politics have forms which I've invented, mixtures of the classical and the innovative is what I always love to do. As all of these works are, in fact, as all of this work is in poetry, I'm going to concentrate on the arts, but I will give you a sort of a taste of the other quintets as I go along. So to begin with, the transitional figures. The 5 which I've chosen to represent this transition in the arts from the Middle Ages to modernity are Cervantes, to start with, who, was mocking knighthood, but I suspect there was a sort of nostalgia at the same time for the loss of medieval times. Then comes John Donne, who, depending on whether he was thinking scientifically or was in bed with a lover, didn't know whether the earth went round the sun or the sun went round the earth, depending on the circumstances. So he's very much a transitional figure in that sense. John Milton is obviously a Reformation figure. And finally then, Handel. Handel is very interesting because it was Handel who took concerts out of the churches and into concert halls, which of course is a real marker of moving from the Middle Ages into modernity. So to represent these transitional figures this evening, I've decided to run with John Donne. Now, in each of these I don't read the haikus. It's just too complex to have three voices when reading, so I'm just reading the four sonnets. And as they work out, the first sonnet always addresses the figure involved, John Donne in this case. He then answers. I address the figure again, and I leave the last word in the fourth sonnet then to the figure involved. Are you that wanton Jack, or Dr. Donne, or both, becoming every part you play, a lover chiding the unruly son, or preacher warning all who disobey? Are you the Catholic boy, your mother's son, whose people still would rather die than stray? Or Protestant, believing all are one, that all may hear, Lord, hear us when we pray? The new philosopher whose sun must stay and bid the passive earth about it run, or wooer whose sun's motions trace a day to thwart love makings only just begun? In showy puns, in each fan-tailed conceit, your actor's role and you conspire to meet. Why can't you fathom all the reasons why? My tortured brother gave his chaplain's name, then died in jail of fever and of shame. A strutting youth, I didn't want to die. Why can't you see the whys that underlie why Jack and Dr. Donne are both the same? I underwent travail and overcame my youthful self, my overweening I. So what if now the sun commands the sky? Philosophy can claim and counterclaim. To ask God's mercy is the preacher's aim. Hear us, weak echoes, O thou ear and cry. My words take up each mood and moment's cue. No player has our playwright's overview. Although your thought takes words, and words take wings, there's still some self-absorption in your tone. As brooding on your life's imaginings, an inward mind makes every world its own. A time so full of anger and hankerings, of reason not content with what's unknown. Your God becomes the workman of all things. You too have stepped beyond the hallowed zone. Whilst our physicians by their lore are grow, we don't hang from old wife's apron strings. That selfsame faith in reason will dethrone a God who trusts to sacred righted kings. Enchanted worlds begin to disappear once you have walked outside the sacred sphere. No Shakespeare hiding in a bigger cast, I strut the stage of my dramatic mind. You too were once a young iconoclast, determined, self-assured, and flying blind. A later self, our youth's own counterblast, again like me you leave Act One behind, and in one woman's love rewrite a past that childhood's flaws and hurts had undermined. My poems are moods I wanted to outlast myself and catch the thrill of thought refined. For all our likeness, so much to contrast. I bless your Dantean sweep of humankind. Three-person God is battering you to see what was and is now shaping what's to be. I'm always fascinated by the private, the personal history of people who then in turn affect society. So I've chosen as the second person to represent these figures, these transitional figures this evening. I've chosen Rubens. painter envoy extraordinaire. You, Rubens, crave the black hole of success, a driven man, the top and nothing else. A Michelangelo, but why stop there? A global citizen, an homme d'affaires, your endless energy still can't redress a father's shameful fall that you suppress in brushes hued and stroked with manic care. The best and greatest, yet so self-aware, compeer of prelates and of noblesse, you're banking on a new assertiveness that Europe's bourgeoisie are soon to dare. You feed the maw of hungry self-esteem and chase a shadowed fame from dream to dream. I keep a deep and sensuous self in check, an Antwerp burger never second best. I zig and zag, but don't stick out my neck, but work to lay my father's ghost to rest. Whatever drives me, I will never tire. A business sense still wants me to be free, to pick and choose the work that I desire, portraying clients who can pay my fee. Both under church and monarchies, I knew an artisan would have to tack and trim, but wealth achieves what gills can never do, and frees an artist from a patron's whim. I preen my gift, and steering my career, I'll match Italian masters I revere. Careerist dreading scandal or disgrace, you marry steady Isabel Brandt with ruff and busk and whalebone carapace, so primped and passionlessly elegant. No carnival or slip betwixt the cup and lip, no risks of love's come hither row, for all your genius still so buttoned up, one perfect husband and his teenage frau. What flashes through a mind is best unknown, assent an eyebrow raised, dissent a stare. Such self-control and no emotion shown, new stoical sang-froid and savoir-faire, a youthful hearth and trauma stains are in, your dream a burgher's ordered discipline. But have you seen my young Elaine with fur? Ambition's push and drive have acquiesced in her, and now for her, with her, by her, with nudes and landscapes, see how I'm possessed. The Eros, bred in bone, will out in flesh, her fifth child sired just weeks before I die. In old age, my desire and spirit mesh, undressing her for every naked eye. Once diplomat and youthful Araviste, I angled for church work. A man of means, I'm artisan, become my patron's peer, and second wives, besotted lyricist. Outsider painting Flemish country scenes, the moods of Europe shift in my career. As I hinted before, the second phase of the arts moves towards much greater freedom, if you like. It moves towards individualism. It moves towards romanticism, in fact. And the sublime has come to replace deity. And even later, a sort of urban decadence has replaced deity. The figures that stand for this era in the arts are Goya, Goethe, Beethoven, Wordsworth, and Baudelaire. So this evening I'm going to let Beethoven represent this phase of modernity. Beethoven, in some ways, of course, is the ultimate romantic. You know what they say, Bach wrote music for God, Mozart wrote music for the angels, and Beethoven wrote music for Beethoven. So we'll move to Beethoven. Proud Beethoven, you come to make your mark, as rhythm by sullen rhythm your will begets a gentler dove that flies the coop of dark, and rage subsides in beautiful regrets. You struggle to endure, not just to please, to navigate all whims and psychic states. A music veers and tacks between distant keys, detours and ponders, dreams, then ruminates. Beyond the measured zones of reason's grace, each squall a palimpsest of elbow grease that earns a calm above a grumbling bass. An inner seascape's deep and hard-won peace. No craftsman here, creator of your art, a genius truculent and set apart. So much I thought I once would do, to wife, to settle down cantabile. But somehow deeper down in me I knew my muse would storm again and I'd obey. I meant to travel but never reach the sea. Instead, like Shakespeare, every human mood must find a voice and bear its melody. In one man's soul, all lines of latitude. As nature ekes its dawns from satin nights, my notes transverse a still unplotted chart. Beyond the polyphony or court delights, I sound the depths of unbeholden art. I mean to shake what logic has confined. Let passion stir up reason's sleepy mind. Through all my churning youth I was a fan. I never could repay the debt I owe. Yet swarty, head-bent, testy Ludwig van, why is it that you never quite let go? Your brothers' wives you always sought to blame, those servants you so suddenly dismiss. A nephew your own smother love will maim, your shadowed self a semitone from bliss. Such hurricanes of phrases scratched and quilled that grope the dark before the light can break, each anchorage achieved by odyssey, the swaying song of some desire fulfilled that riptides of your temper sweep away, deep currents still unease serenity. Long gone my pride, that youthful mutineer, and now my deaf-sealed ears will rub and fret farewell discourses I insist you hear, my close-knit, criss-crossed chamber tete-a-tete. All hauteur shed, and yet hot blood begets hot thoughts that scud inside my silent head. A voyage logged in 5 unheard quartets, where all that's said leaves just as much unsaid. In closing lean and inward traffickings, no bravado now or flourishes decoy the rumbling conversations of the strings, as resignation climbs at last to joy. A note comes home, a final tonic kiss. Applaud, my friends, remember me for this. So I mentioned that we were talking about extremes, but I are moving towards extremes in economics, and of course, possibly should have said when we're talking about the transition figures, it's not hard to imagine them in the other domains, because you just think of Copernicus in science, for instance, or if you think of Martin Luther in religion, it's very easy to Adam Smith in economics, for instance. These were the markers, the people who shifted towards middle. But I'm going to introduce you to a little economics here, because the interesting thing was that in this phase, in this era in economics, you had a reaction to Adam Smith. You had a reaction to this mechanical view of society, this mechanical view of economics. So you got a whole string of idealists. I'm thinking of Henri de Saint-Simon, Robert Owen, Charles Fourier, John Stuart Mill, and Henry George. I don't know if you know of Henry George. He was an American. But I was trying to think who I should use to represent, and I plumped for Henry George because I heard a fascinating piece yesterday on National Public Radio in New York. Or the day before, in fact. No, it was yesterday, actually, on the way home from leaving my wife to work, before I got to the airport. And it was fascinating. Henry George, it was a fairly simplistic view of it, but he saw land as the center of everything. And he was in contact with John Stuart Mills and the others. But this piece on the radio was fascinating because there was a Quaker girl called Liz McGee who took Henry George's philosophy about land and economics so much to heart that she invented a game called the landlord's game. And it was, to use a very modern term, ripped off by a guy called Charles Darrow in Long Island and called Monopoly. And that's the game that still is. So behind Monopoly you have Henry George, basically. She took a case against him but never went anywhere. So she's forgotten history largely. So now Henry George is going to be just a piece in his own words. It's just a section from this piece about him, and it's really him just outlining very basically his philosophy. Here we are. Vocation, vision, name it as you like. It haunts me how, when critics grow, they hike land's worth. When cities grow, they hike land's worth, with workers working all the more. This cleft can widen steadily by stealth, advancing poverty, advancing wealth. But J.S. Mill, do you remember me? We corresponded once and we agree on much. How landowners rely on gains they never earn, while others earn by sweat. I've been a down and out, and don't forget. Indeed, I well recall what we discussed, and unproductive earnings are unjust. Of course, our unlike backgrounds are the keys. Your leanings mean you tend to labourers, where I would tend to think of liberty. Yet in so many ways we're both at one. As nature both belongs to all and none, we both can trust frontiers in trade that's free and guess that communism would narrow down and easily then turn to tyranny. From you I learnt the need for tax on land, but still I wonder if you understand, or you, Ricardo, fully comprehend, though manufacturers may feel the pinch, the weight is borne by workers in the end. But even more as you, Malthus too knew, the giddy economic step and go of growth and slowing down now due to rent, land speculation gone too far will lead to value crashes we could well prevent. A single tax absorbing all land rents would mean we'd purify our governments so wages rise and capital by rights must too, abolishing all poverty, then hoist our culture to yet greater heights and stop the cycles of our boom and gloom. One tax will guarantee a world that's just, What change may come no mortal man can tell. We tremble on an edge, how will it end? It is an upward leap, or lunge to hell. Economy and social science teach the same as what the one was sent to preach to poor and faithful Jewish fishermen. The laws of progress lay it down for us. If morals fall, a culture falls apart. When this book first came out, that had very definite resonances in the United States. So I'm going to now go to the third of these eras, which is the absolute extremes. Now, I hasten to add, while this very likely, of course, points towards the third section, the first section of Dante, this is not a literary judgment, but rather a description of an era within the arts. Or I should say, perhaps not necessarily a literary judgment. So the people that represent here are Wagner, Yeats, Picasso, Joyce, and Kafka. There's an extraordinary inward movement. It's an interiority, an individuality seeking an interiority, which I think is what binds these together. So here's my conversation with Picasso. There at the counter at Au Lapin Agile, a clown among martyrs lone and racked, among the demi-monde and down at heel, you ask how art keeps pace with artifact. Picasso, anarchist and wonder boy, who'll shun perspective, nature's light and shade, to stress the form within what you destroy, collaging brick a brick our hands have made. You are dared les demoiselles d'Avignon becomes those spheres and cubes for you, and Braque, where all things are a process undergone in shifting inner shapes which you unpack. Possessed, a rebel genius set apart, you'll turn romantic king of modern art. Whatever willed, I had the power to pull out of imagination's magic hat. A saddled handlebar becomes a bull. I am the harlequin and acrobat. Like sex desired or song, I am all now. Each period a pedant's shibboleth. No past, no path, no explaining how. Do end days still cry out at age and death? And winning each woman I pursued in blue or rose or classic parody, I'm on the hop, I'm watchful and aware that even though we cubists caught a mood, the moment I submit to what I see, I trust my own eternal youth and flair. The Spanish anarchists have left their spoor. Your youth in you refuses how to grow. Allow your mind to broaden and mature, and you, Picasso, just become more so. Bohemian and Midas out of touch, a famous for being famous millionaire, gone underground and self-engrossed, you clutch at whims and hunches fetched from anywhere. Your painting lovers trapped in lust's machine, for decades filled with cravings mixed with fears, or lone obsessions which your sinking light. A dwarf still doting on a beauty queen, an old man anguished by your appetite, a wizard none the wiser for your years. I searched in my outsider Paris years, when fellow feeling for my demoiselle and passion's conversation with my peers had made me think, although my heart rebelled. Give me élan. For all our cubes achieved, I do not want to search, I want to find. To hell with thought and all things preconceived, I do not work the warren of the mind. Duendes sparking me, now damn my soul, I crave the favors that my fame now grants. and paint the jokes that please and play my role? Have I become a king of sycophants, enclosed in both my fortune and acclaim? I can't outgrow the icon I became. I'll cut that one slightly short and move on because I don't want to keep you too late. So I'm going to now just make a mention of politics. Of course, this period is the worst of all for us in politics. I'm thinking of people like Beckwith and Stalin, Hitler, and of course Lenin, and Bin Laden, rather. I'm intrigued once more, you see, how history, how the history, the personal history, the private history influences the public persona and hence society. So I'm going to now take Stalin as the example of this, and just a small piece from the end of his life where he ended up the lonely tyrant. Russia's fabric torn beyond what mends, even when he makes his half-retreats, downward spirals, inward and around, sink and double on themselves. Lonely emperor befriending kooks, even joking with his bodyguards, seeks out boyhood pals to sing church hymns. Both wives dead, the second shot herself. One son's dead, the other drinks through life, and Svetlana, his one daughter's life is a mess. Seminarian becomes so doctrinaire. Stalin's father bullies all his life, searching, reaching out beyond the Tsar's empire, fearing to disturb the sleeping giant. Guards find him dying, stricken and alone. Buffer states outdated by missiles, boundaries don't respect the broadcast waves. Western clothes and music all seep in, mindless of the blood and bone it cost. Stalin's shut-up system somehow leaks, though his Russia's now a superpower, left alone, unable to adapt. Apathy and dissidence abound. Hell's a closing off of otherness. I moved to the fourth canto in the arts, which is people who had a vision, saw that something was going wrong with modernity. And the people I've chosen here are Dostoevsky, who of course put compassion at the center of everything to heal us. Mahler, of whom it's famously said that, of his music, that every silver lining had a cloud. And then of course Rilke with his fusion of myth and Christianity. D.H. Lawrence, who wanted sensuality to cure modernity. And then T.S. Eliot, who wanted Christianity as the center. I've chosen to read Eliot as the example of this, and it's going to. I think I owe it to Eliot because I've used his title. Or rather, I have echoed his title by calling it the Five Quintets. I've always had this feeling, though, about T.S. Eliot, that he had understood Christianity, he'd understood the sacrifice, he'd understood the selflessness, he understood the cross. But I've always had the feeling that he somehow didn't quite get the joy of the resurrection. I've been taken to task by Eliot scholars for this and so on, but I still hold to it, that I feel there's a lack of this sensation of joy of the resurrection in him. So I'm just going to get T.S. here first. Here we are. Your tone impersonal and passionless, as ruling your own roost in Russell Square, you turn our pain superior, T.S., to wonder, do I dare and do I dare? Your grandfather ingrained in you and Eliot commands a Hamlet you're not meant to be, with chilly politesse and touch me not, more English than the English care to be. And yet, However steely and astute, aware how wastelands of the self can slide, your temperament demands an absolute to order seas of doubt which rage inside the toothed gullet of an aged shark. And will you dare to leap out from the dark? You know the fear I barely hold at bay, the littered waste that lines the ocean floor, my dreaded void, our cultural decay, how I by will belong to right and lore. Tradition I must bow to and then bend, as even in my leap I ease my arc, so each beginning gestures towards its end, as I both dare the light and hint at dark. How strange that I, who struggle to avoid what's personal, despite myself must feed on inner history, tradition's king without forbear, or ere I birth a void and move in measure still unpedigreed, my everything becomes its counter thing. You're lone, who then devised the torment love. Oh, Thomas Stearns, a thrift-taught upright boy, you're dodging cutting loose. Although the dove descending breaks the air, it brings no joy. A static view, maybe some stoic lack, regards the present with opprobrium. Your absolute keeps tending to look back and shudders at the shape of things to come. In mixing reminiscence and desire, the soul sap quivers, brief sun flames the ice. Unless restored by that refining fire, your daring must fall short of paradise. And yet, old possum, your quartet's in trance, when from the still point you still stir the dance. My driving will, my mother's driven son, my artist cold, both Brahmin and urbane, was I all things to all and friend to none? To be a poet cost me too much pain. Although to thaw my ego I had learned to woo a God with prayer and discipline, surrounded by a sense of grace discerned, yet even hard-won faith was honed within. But wait, once for delete instead, write stet, and let my lover's voice just soar to life. A fifth quartet, or should I say quintet? One carefree dedication to my wife, to whom God knows I owe my leap's delight. So we, in the corresponding, this fourth era, so to speak, this fourth canto, in the corresponding one in science is interesting because it's I've chosen Einstein because he's a fascinating figure in this regard, because he couldn't somehow accept. He couldn't accept what Bohr and the Copenhagen school came with, which is I always found very fascinating. But he still remains somehow, doesn't he, the icon of science. And also always attracts a certain humour. You know that famous limerick. There was a young lady called Bright who travelled faster than light. She went off one day in a relative way and came back the previous night. He always attracts, for some reason or other, and the hair and so forth. We always see him as the icon of science. But it is fascinating that he never could actually accept the probability that Bohr and the Copenhagen school were to bring about. So I've always found that very, very fascinating. So I'm just going to read a little bit from the from the end of, he ended up in Princeton, and he ended up with the mathematician Gödel, who some of you may know. There was some wonderful book about it, something about the motorbike, about this famous Gödel, the mathematician. And the two of them used to go for a walk every day. Gödel was much younger. So this is a little vignette from the end of my piece on Einstein with the two of them walking together. Do they fill out each other's might have been? Einstein, the physicist that Gödel dreamed of, and Gödel, the mathsman Einstein left behind. They share a German-speaking world they fled, and each has done his ripest work while young. But more than this, for both the meaning counts. For Gödel, there's nothing due to accident. For Einstein, God is always immanent, and seeking minds have left these men misfits. For both the relative and incomplete, no softening to a vague subjective view, but proof of some great truth beyond themselves, the sacred Euclid book of Einstein's youth, the far out yonder found in certain laws. But discontented with what merely works, these Platonists are walking side by side, two purgatorial disciples who can hear the chant beyond the wall of fire, yet somehow never manage to pass through to wear a stubborn independent streak, which in their bloom would serve them both so well, might come to terms with something less precise, relearning childlike plays of paradise, where gambling God can throw a lover's dice. So we move on to the final canto, and I'm a believer in abundance. I had 5 represent everyone else, but I have 15 in heaven. I wanted an abundant heaven. So they are Dante, Shakespeare, George Herbert, Basho, Bach, Mozart, Coleridge, the Brownings, that's Elizabeth Barrett and Robert Browning, George Eliot, Cézanne, Willa Cather, Chagall, Patrick Kavanagh, Messiaen, and Brian Friel, all 15 in my heaven. It's great playing God, it's good fun. Now, as Dante is in some ways the great model for me with this, I have to read the Dante. I think it's incumbent on me to do that. My Dante, tend del mezzo del cammin, forgotten bulbs, your times again on earth, your gift to see of flowering unforeseen, to rake the soil for Europe's lush rebirth. A rich pre-modern mind allows you mix rife thoughts retrieved with things so up-to-date in science, art, or purse and politics. The cosmos in your seedbed city-state, your lily sign, Firenze's exiled sun. Why is that place assailed by so much strife? Who name and place and face dead figures one by one, descending and ascending after life. By conscious metaphor and fact combined, you parallel the purpose of God's mind. Ah yes, the middle of the way, and yet recall the years I yearned, a troubadour for Beatrice, since May Day when we met, one fateful moment in 1284. I break new ground and graft a comedy. I'm politician, poet, citizen. Though love can shape a tongue in Tuscany, I end in exile, never home again. With Virgil, I will climb hell's deepest ice to reach the doorway of the dead and weep till Beatrice, unknotting nerves in me, redeems my guilt and braving paradise. I dare allow my sacred poem to leap from where we are to where we're meant to be. Your polymath and eager pioneer, who doubling back becomes a daring scout, defining our modernity's frontier by summing up what somehow opens out. A fluke of birth, a lucky florowit, as banished and uncoddled by soft fame, you blame defectors, sham and counterfeit. Unhampered, your cold hell will name and shame. But more, as certain as the second thief, this day in paradise you too are shown, the smile whose warmth unzips the lily's leaf, the light eternal in itself alone. You're stretching still my mind and my desire to walk our daring God of love's high wire. But 7 centuries beyond my theme, you've chosen to pursue the selfsame path, and summing up a Nero work the seam between the modern and its aftermath. You've climbed from hell to heaven's vertigo. I'll be your guide, though dazzled in that gaze, allow flawed words their spill and overflow, for God delights in lily gilding praise. Imagine all we've done or left undone, our broken longings still for more, completed in the glory of one glance. And as both stars and atoms dance and dance, our lives unreal around one loving core, where all our wills and all desires are one. And I'm going to conclude with the final page or two of the 5 quintets. It's the 5th quartet. It's from the theology, stroke philosophy, meaning, if you like. This is the Beatic vision, which corresponds to Dante. Now, in heaven, I'm 5 days, and I'm guided by a woman on each of these 5 days. I'm guided by my first and late wife, Brede, by the Shulamite from the Song of Songs, by Beatrice, by Aisha, the prophet's wife, and by Mary, the Mother of God, or Mary the Virgin. And the people that I have here are John the 23rd, Hannah Arendt, Bonhoeffer, Nurshi, the Sunni, the Kurdish Sunni prophet, or philosopher, I should say. And you mentioned him earlier, so I'm going to mention him again, David, the now controversial Jean Vanier. I'm just going to finish with these. As you'll notice, it's in terza rima, coming from this section, the final section, or the final quintet, rather. I thank my saints, but now a dazzling light begins to draw me to itself and woo me in the way a lover can invite you closer still without compelling you. At once your oldest and your latest flame, renewing thrills of your first rendezvous, a date which your one love and lifelong aim, a sweet compulsion burning from within that makes you want to drop your lover's name. To miss this mark is still the only sin. But following a gleam, I'm now drawn home, a love returning to its origin. Is this the pull of wholeness, a shalom, that both attracts and gives a prepaid peace? I'm walking an arcade of trees, a dome of branches thickly leaved and of a piece, as though I'm moving in parentheses, where there is both excitement and release from inattention or unease, which could distract me from the archer's eye, where flooding light and rumours of a breeze round off a blazing horizontal sky, which beckons me onwards, and I respond. And yet, for all this tunnel vision, I am certain still that this is not some fond farewell, and that I've never been so close to all I love as moving now beyond the time and place of two-dimensioned prose. I hunger for the eye that beckons me along a funneled path between two rows of slightly tilted boles, where every tree is interwoven with its counterpart, convexing such a leafy canopy where opposites can meet and then depart in curves of paradox which shape the light. I can't yet understand, but know by heart that nothing but desire can underwrite my passage through this vaulted light-led zone, that in this ark's eye all things unite. I'm solo here, but still not on my own, becoming more myself in resonance with those I love. I'm never all alone. Already in this arch as I advance, my loneness wound is healing in the eye whose rays now lead me to a skylit dance, a dizzy whirl, a giddy dervish high that pulses onwards to an ecstasy once savoured for its wistful passing by. But dance no longer needs a brevity to add an edge to what might quickly pall. It peaks beyond my wildest fantasy. Then as it climaxes and seems to fall, the moment when a pleasure might abscond, it hasn't neared its apogee at all, but peaks again, and so beyond, surprising me with infinite excess that nothing I have known can correspond to such abundant joy, or could express a sweetness like the moment lovers bond in dewy aftermath without tristesse. So glistening and delighted in their fond embrace, just thrilling at each tipping kiss, as willows glance the surface of a pond, my vase remembers every touch of bliss, each love knot in our pleasure's daisy chain. Although no memory compares with this, each nervelet and synapse inside my brain finds images among its bric and brac to help an aging vessel to contain such joy. Just as some jumper stepping back before a leap recalls an old success, I bring to mind my own beaten track, delights I've known, the follies of jeunesse, the throb of what's achieved, or things explored, each rush when head and heart could coalesce. The high those times the body too had soared, and years of training paid off dividends. The ball I intercepted and so scored, but most of all, together with my friends, around a table when we drank and ate, those evenings when time's rigid arrow bends. But now such pleasures all accumulate in tributaries that can amplify a whole creation flowing here in spate. Be with me so, my saints and stars, as I approach the glory hole of light which shone all day and now fires up the evening sky, like Moses' burning bush that draws me on along this rouging corridor to where the last loose branches in their pink chiffon of leaves half roof the gap to form a pair, and every bole and limb begins to dance. The universe's light fantastic prayer now lauds a wooer taking still a chance on just this cosmic ballet's elegance, where nothing is decided in advance, where hadrons jiggle in their resonance, while galaxies bebop and flowers blaze and cedars and wild animals I glance, a daily choreography of praise. O suitor, never holding us in thrall, but trusting to the ragtime of our ways, as in our brokenness we only fall to rise where all who've come have come by choice. Let's dance across creation's dancing hall. In shadows of your wing I will rejoice. Sound now the bird of jazz's trumpet call. Oh, Micheal, Micheal, cries a lover's voice. Yes, here I am, my madam, all in all. Thank you for listening.
That was really beautiful and inspiring. Thank you. And, really hard act to follow. Thank you. What we're going to do? I wanted to applaud at the end of each reading, but I guess that's kind of like applauding in between the ones. It's like movements. It's not. Exactly. Okay, I'm glad I did. Yeah, we're going to do just one short selection for you before we end the evening. And this is, a couple of years ago I was teaching at Micheal. I would take the train down from Ottawa to Toronto every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then walk from the train station to the university. And it was usually about 30 degrees below zero. But this is my impression of Montreal in the morning. It's called Monday Morning in Montreal. And Mike, you'll notice, is going to play the little saxophone on this one. It's called the soprano saxophone. He was playing the tenor saxophone before, but he's going to play soprano on this one. Thank you so much. We feel really honored to be part of this evening.
Mike and Mark, thank you so much for being a part of this evening. On behalf of the Linlathen team, I just want to say a couple of other thank yous. Micheal, thank you again. Maybe just another round of applause for... We want to again say thank you to Hillside for hosting us here and being able to use the space here. It is always a delight, especially after a couple of years, to be back here. It is good to see everybody here and to be able to have these types of events again. Just want to note that we have refreshments next door in the space over here. Please come and join us, have a conversation, have a drink, have a snack. Speak with an old friend, meet a new one. We would love for you to just take a moment to share some conversation about the evening. Over there, we also have some books. We have some books of Micheal's work. Unfortunately, due to supply chain issues, something we've all become more familiar with. The book that we heard from tonight, we do not have many extra copies of, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is that both the 5 quintets and as well the upcoming Testament, if you purchase a copy here tonight, it will be sent to you, and we are able to give an almost 40% discount on these books if you purchase them tonight. So you just need to see Lindsay over at the table inside if you wish to order one of them, or if you wish to purchase one of them, and they will be sent to your home. So it is possible. We also have, if you notice this sheet, if you have one of these, you can have 20% off of the books as well. You can order them anytime before the end of the year to receive 20% off. Not quite as good a deal as getting it here, but still quite good. We also have some books of poetry of David Lyle Jeffrey here as well, and so we encourage you to take a look at those and consider those. I also just want to say thank you to Jeremy Mulder, who's done a lot of the Lions work of the details. He's up in the sound booth even right now. But Jeremy's done a lot of details to make tonight happen, so I just want to make sure that we give him thanks for that. Am I missing anything else?
Maybe just the cards.
Oh, right. Thank you for reminding me. One of the things we'd hoped is that if you're purchasing a book that you could have the author sign that book. Obviously, not having the book makes it harder for the author to sign the book. But what we do have is we have some cards that Micheal is willing to sign for you that you can place inside your book once your book arrives. So Micheal will be over there as well, being able to sign some of those cards for you. So please join us over there. Thank you all for joining us. It was great to have you here, and we look forward to chatting with you over next door. Good night.